I'm very excited to present to you four great presenters. They're all second-year teachers in New York City school system, private, charter, and district schools, and they've been so generous with their time to help share lessons that they learned in their first year teaching. And so my name is Wayne Tam. I'm one of the co-founders of Selected. We're a platform that helps teachers find jobs, schools and jobs that they love. And so I'll take a minute to talk about what we do at Selected. So there's two parts of it. One is really a school discovery portion of it where it's not unlike a dating application. You answer 8 very quick questions to figure out what school fits your preferences, things from student population, borough in New York City, where you want to work, the culture of the school. Do you care about school leadership, teacher collaboration, safety, parent involvement? So all these preferences go into our algorithm, and we send you back 20 schools that meet your preferences out of potentially 2,000. And so I would imagine some of you have gone through a search or started looking for your first job, or maybe this is your second or third school, but we try to simplify that process. So, and it's totally free. So that's part A. Part B is if you want to move on to the next stage of actually getting hired, we've developed partnerships with close to actually 25 school and school networks now that you have one common application and can apply to all of them at once. And so these are school networks from the usual suspects: Uncommon, Achievement First, New Visions, Urban Assembly, Harlem Children's Zone, to private schools like Avenues and the Gateway School, which is a private school for special needs students. And also we're expanding into, actually we have a bunch of community-based charters, so schools like Brooklyn Prospect, Renaissance Charter in Queens, Academy of the City, etc. So there's a long list, and we're at getselected.co. So that's us. But I'd love to introduce you to our 4 panelists. And so we're going to structure this discussion like so. We're going to take about 40 minutes of the panel. I will direct a lot of the questions, or hopefully just keep it open-ended with respect to the panelists, and then 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. And I wanted to cover, based on the conversations I've had with teachers and also our panelists, I'd love to center it around really 3 kind of core topics. One is around the transition from teacher preparation in school to actual in-classroom experience. The second is expectations as a teacher, performance. What does it mean? How do you measure performance, and what are your expectations as a teacher in the classroom? And then third is around support. How do you get more support and mentorship? What does that look like? And what has the experience been for our panelists? So let's start with introductions. The first is and actually I'll give more time for them to speak about themselves, but this is just Morgan Tarleton. He's at the Bronx School of Law and Finance. We have Maggie, she's at Mesa Charter High School, and at the end we have Sean Mullane. He's a second-year New York City teaching fellow. So thank you all for coming, and thanks for our panelists. So I'll just, so why don't each of you just go down the line and talk just briefly about how you got to your current position.
All right, hello. So my name is Morgan Tarleton. Like he said, high school English teacher, Bronx School of Law and Finance. I actually went to school, and my teacher prep program was in Connecticut, the University of Connecticut, which was an excellent program, but the experience of coming from Connecticut to New York in terms of certification is a nightmare. So if you plan on teaching in New York, go to a teacher prep program in New York. It's the best advice I can give you. Makes your life a lot easier.
I'm Maggie. I'm at Mesa Charter High School, which is like mom and pop charter in Bushwick, founded 3 years ago. So we're in our 4th year now. I spent my last year teaching there as well. I was an undergraduate at the University of North Carolina and did in my last 2 years a teacher prep program. So I wasn't an ed major, I was a bio major, but they have a program to quickly prepare math and science majors to get certified in North Carolina. So I got my North Carolina high school teaching license, then came straight from undergraduate to New York, had a connection to this school that referred me, and ended up at Mesa last year, and this is my 2nd year there.
Hi, I'm Sean Mullane. And I think Wayne included me to raise the average age of our panel quite a bit. As you can tell, I'm a career switcher. This neighborhood is my old stomping ground, Wall Street. I got kind of tired of helping wealthy get more wealthy and receiving no respect for it. So I figured I'd try to participate or go into a career where I could help push a little bit in the other direction, move some of the 99% north economically. How did I get into teaching? Well, for a couple of years, I was a treasurer of a food cooperative in Brooklyn, a small one, Green Hill Food Cooperative. And there were a lot of teachers there, and there was no teacher I didn't like. And so they encouraged me to apply for the teaching fellows. I'd been doing finance in the nonprofit sector, which I was finding kind of dull. It's mostly office work. So I went through the 5-week training process over the summer and was plunked full-time into a 6th grade to 12th grade school in Flushing last year. I'm transitioning to a school up in the Bronx, a high school. And I have a principal who seems to know more about navigating the bureaucracy of the Department of Education than anyone at the headquarters of the Department of Education. So I feel lucky and will be teaching there soon.
Great. Thank you. So I'll just start with the first question around the transition from this teacher prep heading into the classroom. What did you find most difficult? Is this not sounding well? What did you find most difficult about the transition from from school or your prep program into the classroom? And we can just go down, I guess, back down the line.
Oh, yeah, physical exhaustion. So you're getting up early. That was a 90-minute commute last year. I live in Brooklyn, out to Flushing. And then, teaching is kind of like you're a member of a repertory theater, except every period you're putting on a new play. And every day you're putting on, maybe 5 new plays. Fortunately, last year I was teaching 4 subjects with 4 co-teachers. Those are called like 4 prep. So I had 4 new plays every day. This year I'll just have 2 plays a day, which I'll perform twice, 2 sections of 9th grade and 10th grade English. So it was the physical exhaustion that was most challenging. And I found regrettably that I promised to my co-teachers that I could do more than I found that I had the energy to do. So when you do start, under promise and over deliver.
I will second physical exhaustion for sure. The biggest thing for me was I came from like an undergraduate program. So it was like 5 undergraduate courses, and then I did student teaching, but there was so much talk about like the ideal classroom. And like ideally, how do you have a beautiful backwards planned lesson every single day? And how are you making sure student and teacher voice ratio is perfect, and all of these ideals, and then moving from my ideal classroom and my ideal teacher self to like realistically what it looked like my first year, because it really did not match up a lot. And that was kind of tough to be like, oh, I can't make an incredible backwards planned lesson every single day. And like, it's not gonna go as beautifully every single day. And so just recognizing that and not letting that, one, overwhelm me to the point of just shutting down, and also not letting that mean that I was working until 9 p.m. every night, right? Because there's like always more work you can do to get to that ideal, but your first year, it's just not gonna be ideal yet, and that's okay, and that's fine, and you'll get better. But it was definitely, I think, a tough transition to be like, oh, this is what I want to happen, and it just simply is not gonna happen at first. And then working with that and still having a great time and getting better and improving, but just knowing that that is the case, and still having that ideal in your mind.
Right. So for me, the transition in the classroom and with the academics, the pedagogy wasn't particularly difficult. For me, I was very fortunate. I came from an excellent teacher prep program. The University of Connecticut, you go through 5 years, you get 2 bachelors and a master's, you student teach, and you're placed in 3 additional schools. I came in with a great idea of what I was going to do in the classroom and who I'd be as a teacher. What was not easy for me in a transition was the sheer volume of it. Because when you're student teaching, you have 1 class, or when I was interning, I was there once a week. You have no idea until you start to get into it what it's like to have 5 classes, 2 preps. I don't know how the hell he did 4 preps. That sounds like a nightmare. And all the extra stuff to come to it. I was just talking about recently, while I've been sitting here, I got 2 more emails for teacher reports to fill out for IEPs that I have to send in tomorrow. And I have to do those on the subway tomorrow. So there's just so much stuff you need to do. And it's hard to get ready for until you're just in it. And you just got to wade through it sometimes and remember how much you love being with the kids and how great that is. A lot of my colleagues here have stressed flexibility, and that is definitely the easiest way to have a successful transition. Because I had this idea in my head, I'm going to come in the week before school starts, I'm going to set up the nicest classroom ever, I'm going to put in all this time and buy all these things. And I ended up working at the JFK campus, which I don't know if you remember this or if you heard about this, but 2 years ago, there was a giant explosion there over the summer. So I got hired in an Applebee's, which was interesting, and could not get into my classroom until the first day of school because they were still cleaning up the explosion. And they had thrown tons of just garbage in my room because several classrooms had been lost. So I got there about an hour before it started. The room was a mess. There was just boxes everywhere. I just kind of had to go with it. And whatever. The kids came in and they're like, "Mister, what the hell is this?" And I'm like, "I don't know, man. This is my first day here too." But if you're flexible, if you roll with it, and the kids don't care that much. If you get a little overwhelmed, if they know you're there for the right reasons, they can tell you care about them, you give a damn, they'll roll with it too. The kids are extremely flexible, more flexible than you will ever be, as long as you give them that opportunity.
That's great. I mean, I guess it sounds like there's 2 parts of it. One is kind of the mental mindset part of it that a lot of you have spoken about. What about just the sheer workload, right? The time management, managing that. Can you guys talk a little bit about maybe just like your best tip or 2 around managing time and your work-life balance? We can start with you, Morgan.
For sure. You just got to set a routine. It's funny because I teach an advisory course for troubled freshmen right now, and I tell them the same thing. Set a routine and stick to it. I got up at the same time in the morning. I got on the same train. I didn't leave school until I had finished my grading and knew at least kind of what I was doing the next day. Because you don't need that unnecessary stress of suddenly realizing, I haven't graded 4 days worth of essays, or I don't actually know what I'm doing today. So no matter what, no matter how much it sucks, at the end of the day, make sure you're ready to just not be miserable tomorrow. Never set yourself up for failure. You know, in the long term, you're gonna have to juggle some things, but know that your next 24 hours are set and that you're going to be able to do that well. Because not only is it going to suck for you, but it's going to suck for the kids, and that's just never acceptable.
I'm sort of on the same line. So 2 things that I'm thinking about. One, as far as like work-life balance, I have one of my pet peeves is like I'll be doing work and then people are leaving. It's like 5:36, whenever it is, and they're like, "Don't stay too late. You know, make sure never stay past 7 or whatever it is." And I'm like, "But I have all this stuff to do. Like I haven't planned my lesson. What do you mean to leave right now? I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow." And so realizing, like, first off, there will be some nights that you have to work until 10. Like, right? That's fine. It shouldn't happen every single day. But like for me, I know myself as a worker. Our school has a permit, so it's open for like 5 hours on Saturday. I'm the person where like if I can set up my lab on a Saturday and do it in my leisure time and put on music while I'm doing it, I would much rather do that than rush on Monday morning and try to get my copies done when everybody else is doing theirs. So for me, like I worked on Saturdays more last year than I am this year because it allowed me to be like a little bit more sane, and it allowed me to feel a little bit more at ease going in. And then, okay, so I had a little bit less time on the weekends, but like it worked for me. If that's not you, don't do it, but that worked for me. Also, as far as like kind of choosing how much work you're gonna put in, right, there's infinite stuff you can do. So it really helped me to decide consciously, like, what are the things that are kind of gonna take a back seat. So like in my class last year, I just like didn't really give homework. You know, I didn't really need to in my class. It wasn't hugely beneficial for the students. And I knew it was going to be a ton more work for me. maybe you could argue it would have given my class like a little bit more legitimacy. Like it might, maybe it would have upped the rigor a little bit more. But I knew the work it would give me versus the benefit. I was like, no homework, you're fine, go home, no homework, we're good. And in addition, like our school does these things called e-scores. And so we are standards-based grading. So in that model, it doesn't fit to grade their homework or effort. So we have like a separate score system, 0 through 4. Every week, every student gets a score in your class on their effort, their punctuality, their homework, whatever. And so that was like a lot. And you're supposed to give individual comments for each student. You know, in an ideal world, I would have sat and gave like really great comments. You did this great. You know, let's work on this, whatever. But like, if I did all of that, then I was rushing for lesson plans. So there were lots of weeks where I was like, everybody got 4 on effort. Great job. Here's a standard comment. And it was fine. Like it was totally fine. Right? This year, I'm putting in a little bit more time, individualizing my comments a little bit more because I'm more efficient at other things. But it was more important for me last year to work on my lesson planning and to be able to have a little bit more time thinking through that stuff slower. And then I rushed through the e-scores and you didn't get a personal comment. I'm so sorry. But it worked for me and it kept me a little bit more sane.
So I'm a special education teacher. So on the time management front, there is no way that I'm going to master the subject matter content of whatever class I'm co-teaching. So what I do is I focus on the students who have the individualized education plans, who have learning challenges of different kinds, to make sure that whatever's going on in the lesson, they're going to be able to access it. Because in addition to my responsibilities in the classroom, I also am responsible for writing anywhere from 5 to 10 of these individualized education plans every year. It's a legal requirement. You must meet the deadline, and it takes a lot of work, as Morgan pointed out. He's participating in the delight of assembling one of those, you know, tonight or tomorrow on the subway. Yeah, right, exactly. Oh, and also time management. If you can get a seat on the subway, I've got a long honking commute at my new school, then budget time to work on the subway as well. I'll say more about the work-life balance. Last year, I dropped, when I started the teaching fellows in the training in July, I used to exercise, I don't know, for 15 minutes every morning, and I would do meditation, just follow my breath, which would help center me. And I dropped that my first year teaching. You know what? It was a mistake. I had trouble finding a new position this summer, and when I had a particularly disappointing outcome in August, I said, okay, forget about it. I don't care how stressed I am. I'm now going to do my daily exercise, my meditation. And so it's helped me kind of weather through not teaching. I mean, this transition period here, and I'm going to keep it up when I start teaching again. Also, keeping in touch with family and friends. Go back to your sources of strength. Whatever is going to recharge you, because you're going to be depleted emotionally, physically, and I find the exercise and meditation, just being with friends, like at my food co-op, it's like, oh, I'm with my people again. It really helps. Don't give that up. And so many of us teachers do, and you get sucked into this school environment, which kind of eats up the principals, the assistant principals, and the teachers alike. Make sure you've got something else going on in your life.
Great. And so my next question is really around expectations. So it sounded like you'd have some judgment, right? Flexibility, or you're exercising judgment on what's important, what's not important in the classroom, what you would be, for example, not giving homework or other kind of classroom activities. How did you know what was expected of you, what wasn't expected of you? How did you get the information? How did you adjust your expectations, what you thought your supervisors or principal, assistant principal wanted out of the classroom? And yeah, we can go back down.
Yeah, so So I come from a business background and have an MBA as well. So management administration and setting clear goals, whether they're budgetary goals or financial goals or performance goals, was something I was used to. And I don't know if there's much you can do ahead of time. You're not going to know whether you're going to be set realistic goals, but I would advise, to the extent that the leaders of your school are comfortable giving you written goals, well, then at least you can reference back to what those are. And if those written goals are too challenging, then you can say, well, wow, that's kind of uncomfortable. Can we set some interim goals? Because, yeah, but it's a challenge, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'm like always a super big proponent of like communicating, almost over communicating. And I think there's a lot that you can do, especially informally, before you get to any sort of like formal observation or whatever, to figure out like really what are the expectations. Because I think depending on where you are, there's always going to be the explicit expectations, and I think there's always like some implicit expectations too, where like if you're at the school for a while, you like kind of get the deal, and like here's what you're supposed to do, but we kind of know that this is what usually goes on. And like these are some other expectations that maybe are not always presented as clearly, but are still important to school culture. And I think I've figured out a lot of those expectations informally from conversations with coworkers, asking people who maybe were not my like immediate superior for feedback and for help. I think there's lots of times where you can sort of find someone who you're like, okay, that's a teacher who they seem willing to like help me out with something, to support me. They're really great at writing lesson plans. They're really great at modifying, whatever it is. I feel uncomfortable with this. I'm going to go to that person. Hey, can you kind of look this over? Maybe can you observe my class? I don't know how free teachers are, but I feel really lucky. A lot of the teachers in my school are willing to like come observe me during their free period or something. And so I spent a lot of time just being like, here's a thing I feel kind of uncomfortable about, or like, I think I'm not so good at this. Could you maybe come observe me, help me out? And then I get a lot of informal feedback that way. And that allowed me to feel like way more comfortable and confident going into anything that was like formal observation, because I had already had a lot of conversations with people who had been at the school, people who were more experienced with me, and they were able to give me that open and honest feedback of what actually looks good and what doesn't, and where I can work. Because at sometimes I liked kind of like being under the radar when I could, but you're never really going to know how well you're doing until you ask someone and until they give you that feedback. And so you might as well do that as much as you can as early as possible. So then, you can work on that stuff to improve. So then when you get to formal observations, it's just kind of like a, hey, looking good, you're doing great, big thumbs up. So lots of informal conversations. Find your kind of allies in school and ask them those questions first.
For me, knowing expectations and knowing clear expectations starts in the interview. When I met with every principal I interviewed with, I very specifically asked them, what do you expect from me as an educator? What do you expect from me as a teacher? What do you expect from me as a coworker? And they told me. And I went into the interview process really caring only about one thing more than anything else, and that was finding a leader that I felt I could work well with. The school I accepted a job at was not as new and shiny as some of the schools that offered me positions. It was not as prestigious as some of the schools that offered me positions, but I liked the principal the best by far. She told me, I'm going to tell you what's expected of you. I'm going to leave you relatively alone. And if your classroom doesn't burn down, I figure you're doing a decent job. I want you to come and speak to me if you have questions, or if you think something is wrong in this school, or if you think I should be doing something differently. Me and my principal have a very open rapport with each other. We discuss things very openly. People that see us talk to each other assume that I've been working with her for years. And it's because that is the reason I picked my position. It's because just from the interview itself, I felt that expectations were clear. And some people work differently, but for me, I like to know what people need from me. I like to know what people want from me. I don't want to be walking around thinking, am I doing this right? Because I'm good at my job, and I know that. And you should all know that when you start teaching. You should be confident. But I don't want to sit around and wonder, am I doing it the way my boss wants me to? Am I gonna go into my eval and suddenly have my boss go, what? No, like this is all wrong. Clear expectations are from open communication, and for me that starts in the interview process and the selection process.
And I have one last question before we open it up to the crowd. So everyone in the crowd, if you have questions, start thinking about them, or if you don't have questions, start thinking about them. My last question, I'm kind of going backwards because I thought I never got to this, but a lot of you have had co-teaching experiences. I guess I would imagine most first-year teachers do. Can you talk about what was most difficult and about co-teaching and how you can manage it more optimally if it wasn't a great experience?
That's an awesome question. So co-teaching, I feel like in my experience, is something people don't learn enough about when they begin. And last year, I know I wasn't an effective co-teacher. I know I was an effective teacher. My ratings reflect as such. The kids did fine. But my co-teaching experience was essentially me planning the lesson, my special ed cooperating teacher coming there the period of, we never had time to meet or do anything, and that wasn't for lack of trying, but she was always doing IEPs. She had a full course load. I had a full course load and was commuting from New Jersey at the time. And so I would teach and she would float. I would communicate my differentiation with her to make sure I was meeting people's IEP requirements. But I basically taught, and she floated around the room and assisted students, especially the high need students. And that's not co-teaching. That's teaching with an aid. It's just not it. So if you want to be an effective co-teacher, you need co-planning time. You need to set that aside. Now, that's one thing I spoke with my principal about after my first year. And this goes back to having open communication with your boss and things like that. And we told her, I need co-planning time. I had assigned hallway duty this year, and I told her, I'm not going to accomplish anything in the halls. I'm going to be wandering. But if you move my lunch and my hallway duty, me and my co-teacher will have the same. We can just have collaborative planning time. And that's what we have now. We have a period that we meet every single day. We go over, not only at the beginning of the week, we go over the week's lessons and each other's roles in them. We go over what kind of strategies we're going to use, whether it's parallel teaching, stations, any of these fantastic things. I'm not going to run through all of them because we don't have the time, and you can Google co-teaching methods, they'll come up. But we discuss which kids we think are struggling, which kids needs parental intervention, which students we work best with. And we can tweak those lessons every day. Plus, we can just work off each other because she teaches 3 other classes. I teach 3 other classes without her. And we have this great open relationship full of communication. And you're not going to be an effective co-teacher if you don't have time to plan together. And also, one last thing would be, as I'm the content teacher, so it's usually pretty natural for me to take the lead because I'm doing the bulk of the lesson plan itself because I know the content. You need to go out of your way, especially if you're the content teacher, to make it abundantly clear that you are equals in the classroom. You can't say things like my classroom or my kid. You have to say our classroom, or when you say like, oh, I thought Mr. Tarleton was your favorite teacher, you go, what, Mr. Tarleton and Miss Glover aren't your favorite teachers? You have to be very careful to make sure you aren't sending a message that you are more important than your cooperative teacher, because you're not. It's your class, they're your kids, all of them.
Seconding a lot of that, definitely the communication aspect. And to go back to a thing that Morgan was talking about when you said you realized you didn't have planning time and you went to your leadership and you were like, here's how we can make it happen. Like, if I've learned anything, it's like my best outcomes and everyone around me that have their best outcomes when they're totally solutions oriented, right? Because there's always going to be stuff that is not ideal. And like, teachers love to talk about the issues that they're having, right? So much work, all of these things that are not going right, all of these obstacles that you have, like, they're there. Everybody's got them. If you are just talking about them, like, they're going to stay there. But to the best of your ability, when you can take something and be like, okay, how can I work with this? What can I change? Who can I go to? What can I ask for? And then what do I just kind of need to accept and move on? Like, you're definitely going to have a better time. And with my co-teaching pair last year, so I had a co-teacher. It was an interesting situation because we were both first-year teachers. he was like trying out education. So like I at least had a prep program. He was coming like no background at all, really just coming to like see if he liked education, and like it turned out he did not. He left before the end of the year, so like we had a tough time. Like he was maybe not the best personality for that classroom, and he kind of realized that soon and kind of felt overwhelmed. And I was sort of the opposite, where even though I was also first year, I would sort of I was a little bit more of the content person, and it was more natural for me to kind of take the leadership role in class. And it became very clear to the students really quickly that like Miss Walker was the one that's going to be the manager, and like I'm going to be the one to get you in trouble, and my co-teacher is like not really going to be that person. And that was really tough for us to work together as a team in class when we kind of weren't a team at first. And the only time it got better was one, when I was super, super open and honest with him, and we would have classes where like it was kind of chaotic, and I felt like I was like boom, 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 I need to talk to you, you need to be here. And he would be kind of like chilling in the background, let me do my thing. And then afterwards I'd be like, hey, like I need you. Like it maybe looks like I am doing my thing, but like me, I'm overwhelmed and I need another person to help me manage this class, and like you got to be there for me. And that was uncomfortable for him, and it was uncomfortable for me to have the conversation, and he was feeling a little bit uncomfortable being the manager, but it was like we've got to work out something. And so communicating as best I could, and then working with like our department head was observing us a lot, and he was really helpful. And we would sit down and have really, really targeted conversations that were like, okay, here's this one thing that we're going to work on. And I would talk to him on my own, and he would talk to my co-teacher on his own, and we would have joint conversations, and they would get like really, really nuanced. Like we had a conversation just about like the way that we lesson plan, and our department head like observed the two of us lesson planning and like took notes on us lesson planning, which was super awkward, but it was really helpful because it was like, okay, let's take that now and let's make this process a little bit more efficient. Now let's plan when you come, you need to be coming with like this and yada yada. And it got a little bit incrementally better because we took what we were working with and like just made it a little incrementally better. And I definitely spent a lot of time like frustrated and venting, but like the venting sessions didn't get me anywhere. Like the solutions based, like what are we working with, where can I go, did. And he ended up leaving, but we got to a better place before he left. And that was only because we like super, super communicated and just like worked really hard on making those little changes. So yeah, co-teaching is, and I definitely agree with the idea that you've got to be okay with it being a shared classroom, and it's not going to be all the way yours, but like that's cool. You're like a little relationship, and you build something together, and it's kind of exciting.
Okay, I'll make this quick. I've learned a lot from my panelists. Thank you. Which I'll be applying this upcoming school year. So as a special education teacher, I'm fortunate this year. Normally you would have maybe 2 co-teachers if you're in a giant high school. There still are a few that have a couple thousand students, so you might teach one subject and have 2 co-teachers. The reason why in my high school, which is only 300 students, I only have 2 co-teachers is because we have double the number of special education students than the average New York City district high school. So as you're looking, if you are interested in special education, be clear that some high schools are going to offer you an opportunity to have fewer co-teachers, and that just makes it easier. Also, I heard something from my colleagues in the panel here. If you put the students first, okay, and you always come back, listen, we've got to do what's important for the students. We've got to do what's important for the students. That'll help a lot, okay? And let's see if we can put our ego aside. And also, in New York State, I don't know if it's, well, in New York State, in the public schools anyway, you have to have a mentor for your first year. I would have used my mentor to basically help me work on the 2 most difficult co-teaching relationships that I have, to actually sit with me and my co-teacher and sort things out over the first 2-3 months of the fall. And how about a little Q&A?
Great. So for those folks who have questions, raise your hand and we'll pass around a mic. Yeah. Okay, so the first one is in the black sweater. And then
Hello, I'm an elementary school teacher in the Lower East Side. This is my first year teaching. I'm in week 4, and I'm still live. Thanks. My question is behavioral issues. That's the main thing we're having trouble with at my school. Any advice? Any tips?
For me, routines. I have several routines in my classroom. For me, I always found that the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes can be the most chaotic that you'll have. So I got my students into a very set routine. Once the bell rings, the do now would be on the board. They copy down the aim. They answer the do now question. They do that. If they don't do it by the time I'm done taking attendance, they don't get credit for it. And you will see them, they come in, and even the loudest kids, they see me start taking attendance, their notebook's out, and they're all quiet. End of class, I always end with an exit slip. So they're starting to get a little tired. They're starting to get a little out of control. I do my exit slips on Post-it notes. It's ridiculous, but they love it. So they see me start putting Post-it notes on people's desks. Someone's starting to fall asleep. I put it on their head. They wake up. They get all. And on the way out, they all get really excited because they start writing on that thing, and they all do the same thing. They try to put it as high above the door as they can and see who can do it. And they know they can't get out of their seat until that bell rings. But they all stop talking to each other so they can fill that out. So when the bell rings, they can go put that up while their classmates are still there to see how high they can jump. I have a set place. I have folders for when I hand back work. Folders are all in a certain file area labeled with each class. They all have their designated homework folder. There's a designated homework drop-off spot. They all know where to put their homework. There's a spot in the back that's clearly labeled with the day's work prior, all makeup work. And I accept all makeup work, even if they were there, if they want to do it. So they have all these routines they have to follow. They know that only one person can have the bathroom pass at a time. The more routines they have, the less opportunity they have to act out. And one last thing, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but especially in an urban population, you can't have the same standards as maybe a suburban school, a more traditional environment. A little bit of talking is okay. You'll find that by trying to police your students and keep them super quiet and sit straight at your desk and don't talk to your neighbor at all, you're going to have so much more resistance. It's not even funny. I let my students talk a little bit. I have a few students who tell me, Mr. T, I really like to get up and move around when I get frustrated. I'm like, all right, take a lap. I don't care. And there's no huge issues. There's always a dull roar and nothing horrible. They know when I'm serious to calm down, and they follow their classroom routines. And that has made classroom management just a breeze for me, and I'm only in year 2. So.
I'll just add quickly to that. Agreed. Like my second year is going so much better because I spent a lot of time planning routines. And for me, I came in and was so amped to teach the science. I'm like, science nerd, like let's go into the science. I was like, I don't want to like this is dumb for me to spend a lot of time on like, let's see how we pass in papers. Like you guys are in high school. But I realized that stuff, like spending a lot of excessive, almost like it's almost a joke how much time you're spending on being like, love, that was amazing that you passed those papers forward in 5 seconds. Like, like spending a lot of time on that and making it really fun and goofy is one, it's a chance for like every kid to immediately succeed and then feel good. And if high schoolers love this stuff, then I'm sure like younger kids are gonna, I imagine, love it as well. But just spending a lot of time and like making that the lesson was uncomfortable for me at first, but now I'm like, okay, it's so much better and we can have fun with it. And now, yeah, I like it's an exciting thing when like everybody in your seat when the timer goes off and whoa, my God, that was amazing. And like everybody feels good because they did, even if they didn't understand the lesson, like they did that thing correctly today. And it helps everything, it helps everything feel safer, more comfortable, and saner for sure.
I would say I have a couple neighbors in my building in Bed-Stuy who work for Uncommon Schools. One's maybe in the mid-20s, the other one maybe 30. And I got to tell you, they look burned out. That's one thing. 2 of my co-teachers were married with young daughters, my English co-teachers last year at my DOE school, and they seem to manage it quite well. They also struck an excellent balance between their personal life and their school life. After school, boom, they're out of there, okay? The ones who were most unhappy were the teachers who basically let the school life take over their lives, and they were absolutely miserable. And you know, if you love what you're doing, that helps a lot too. But there's those practical things you want to take into account.
Are there any other questions? Are there any questions in the crowd? Okay. Well, this is the wrong mic here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. If you have any additional questions, I mean, I'm sure some of our panels will stick around, but thank you all for coming.